Hello, and welcome to this edition of People in Transition. I'm your host, Bob Gerst. I've been hiring and mentoring executives, frontline employees, and job seekers for nearly 40 years through a host of transitions, some difficult, but most very good. This experience has given me a bird's eye view on a variety of trends, economies, industry disruptors, and transitions, big and small. It also brought me into contact with the thought leaders and decision makers you need to meet. Imagine knowing exactly what to do next and how to know it's time to make your big job change. We all know transitions can be scary, but it doesn't have to be. And it's even fun when you have actionable strategies and proven tactics to achieve the future you want. We'll share with you the tools and skills that can take your dreams to your next great job. So if change is on your horizon, you won't want to miss this discussion. Also, please subscribe to this podcast so you won't miss any future episodes. Dominic Imwalle, I am so excited that we have the opportunity to talk today. I've been looking forward to this and your thoughts, tips, techniques for people who are looking for their next great job opportunity. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Bob. I really appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Dominic, when you were younger, what is it that you wanted to be when you grew up?
This is a good one. This is a funny one that I think about a lot. I grew up with my dad watching, I don't know if you've ever seen the show NCIS. I actually had it on today, and I always wanted to be Abby from NCIS. And for those who haven't watched that, she's a forensic scientist. And so, right, whenever I was growing up, I was looking at criminal justice. Hey, how can I, biology, how can I get into there, leverage myself into there? And then, so that's it. That's what I always wanted to be while growing up. And I always looked up to that and thought it was really cool and interesting.
And so what were the transition moments that you went through from being that vision of you being a forensic scientist to where you're at today?
For me, there were a lot of transition moments. I think it was when I got away from the people that I always surrounded myself around or grew up with. I had the opportunity to go to school in Austin, Texas, but I didn't really, getting put in a bucket of cold water. It wasn't my first choice. I wasn't going to a school that all my friends were going to. And I got down there and it was around this startup vibe, this young culture, this entrepreneurial spirit, and I just kind of got hooked on it. And so from right then and there, I kind of fell into the business world. And I think what also happened was I was there on a full academic scholarship. So it was like, hey, how do I leave this university with the most bang for my buck? And along those lines, I was connected with some people who were doing accounting and computer science. And so the dream of being Abby from NCIS quickly faded as I got around some of these people and just naturally grabbed my interest. I think as we get older and we get around new people and we get around new conversations, things start to pique our interest. And so that's where mine turned to the accounting world and the business world and that startup spirit. And that's kind of why I'm here today, right? I run my own business, and that's something that it wouldn't have started if I didn't get down to Austin and I didn't get around new people.
You've talked before about how you prepare yourself for the layoff. What does that mean, and what should they be doing to prepare for that layoff?
It's tough. I think it's one of those things that we're seeing all the time now. And right when it happens, it's like, oh, I could have been doing something 2 to 3 weeks ago. Oh, I could have been doing this. And we're pretty hard on ourselves. And I think the first thing when preparing for a layoff, right, preparation is a weird word here. And I think you can only prepare as much. I think I'm in this constant state of, I wouldn't say preparation. I'm not thinking doom and gloom. I'm not thinking that's coming. But if that were to come, I think some key things for me is that, one, I keep a file of moments where I've won over the last couple projects, the last year, where I've stood out or where someone's told me, hey, Dominic, you did a really good job here. That's always helped me. That's never proved me wrong, whether I go to performance conversations, meetings with managers or anything like that. Another thing I think candidates can be doing is taking a look at what's out there. I don't think it hurts from time to time. I would say every year, half a year, take a look. What's going on in your market, around you geographically? What are some exit opportunities for you if something were to happen? I think it's important to be looking at because no one else is going to be looking at it for you. Someone isn't on the backside saying, hey, Bob, I'm looking at this opportunity for you. I think you should really take it in case. That rarely happens. And so if you hit those two things and then just remember that you need to look out for yourself and it's okay to be a little bit selfish here, those are some key tips that I would give to someone who's thinking about a layoff coming up.
Dominic, I've read somewhere that you talk about the need in your networking efforts to target the right people. What does that mean and how do you do that?
I think the thing here, and when I'm working with clients, and that's one of our first couple sessions when we start talking about this, hey, how do we target the right people? And when I'm teaching them about, hey, we're not going to apply to jobs anymore, we're going to flip the script and we need to go out there and talk to people. I see some clients and I just see some people out there immediately go right to LinkedIn and just try to talk to random people. They just someone in my network, someone liked a post that I thought was cool. And they don't start from a common ground or somewhere that they know. There's a graphic out there of all these bubbles, right? Family, friends, aunts, uncles, and then it gets wider and wider as it goes out. Coaches, professors, mentors. And I think when I talk about targeting the right people, one, they have to be in the role you want. There's no point in going to ask. I wouldn't go talk to someone in accounting about how to be a forensic scientist. That doesn't make sense. And there's times where we're talking to people who either don't have the experience that we want to have, or we're just getting random advice from random people that we see out there. So I think that's one of the things I'm saying when we target the right people. Secondly, it's just starting with setting yourself up for success. It's easy to go out and hit up those random people and reach out, and then you're quickly getting denied, and then you're already losing confidence, and you're already starting to think, oh, this doesn't work, that doesn't work. Whereas you really need to start with circles you know. If you're in the professional world, if you're on LinkedIn, I can guarantee that you graduated from a university. I can guarantee that you have networks and organizations that you've been a part of that you aren't utilizing. And so going to those people first and then seeing how you can branch out with the right people in those roles that you want. That's what I'm talking about when I say the right conversations.
Let's talk about that reaching out. Help me with the script that you would recommend someone use to let your friends and your other networks know that you're in the job search mode and how they can help you.
The script is so hard for me. I have people reach out all the time for this. I did create a little guide for when you're reaching out to, whether it's an alumni, whether it's a professor. For me, I've always kept it short and sweet. Hey, how are you doing? I noticed this from your profile. I'm looking at this because of this reason. Just being super transparent behind the process. I'm in search of this role, and then I wrap it up at the end. When it's going out to friends, family, maybe it's a little bit more informal. But I think always being concise and getting to the point is huge in those initial messages. And then two, being straightforward and honest about your situation is huge. And I think not being overbearing. There's a lot of times where messages are 3 to 4 paragraphs. And I guess that reflects on the first point. But there's a lot of times where people reach out and they're like, hey, can you do these 5 things for me? And it's like, I don't know you yet. How would I even refer you? How would I look at your resume? How would I help you on an interview if I haven't even met you? So those first couple outreaches, hey, Alex introduced me to you, said you would be a great person to speak with. I was wondering if you had 20, 25 minutes so I could learn more about the work that you do. Something that always helped me and my clients was focusing on the work that person does and that person, right? People inherently love to talk about themselves. So getting them to do that more often is best practice.
And you also suggest leveraging conversations with former employers. What does that look like?
I think for me, the classic consultant response, it depends. If you left your past employer in a bad situation, you're probably not going to reach out to them. But if you've operated the way I hope you operate in your past roles, a high performer, operating with respect as you go throughout situations. I text with one of my bosses from an old internship every couple months just to check in and see what's going on. I keep in touch with people that I've worked with in the past just to see, hey, what's going on here? Oh, are there any opportunities there? What does this look like? And I think they're there not only to help you see, but also if you have a good enough relationship, they're there for you to bounce ideas off of. Maybe you really enjoyed those people. Like there's people in my current role now that if I were ever to leave, I would totally go back to them. I think they're great at handling my ideas outside of, my 9 to 5 and inside of it. And so I think just using them for the right reason You probably aren't going back to them and saying, oh, hey, I need this job. Help me get it. Being super strict and stuff like that. It's more just, hey, I'm looking for this piece of advice or this piece of information. That's how I would formally network with past employers. Well, I wouldn't say that's my first place I'm going.
Dominic, I've seen somewhere as you write about that your resume should not be a job description of the role you had, but really a story of how you added value to that company. What did you mean by that?
I think it's easy when, I was just working with an awesome client and I popped open her resume and I was like, wow, I'm glad we don't have to spend any time here, because one of the first things under her most recent roles was significant accomplishments. Hey, what did I do in this role that stood out and wasn't part of the normal process? When I'm talking about one with job requirements, you can clearly tell it's as if they went to Indeed.com, they went to their role, and they pulled it right off there. Or they pulled it from the email they got from HR when they got hired. Hey, this is what I do. This is X, Y, and Z. That's awesome. You might have a fantastic role that requires you to do a lot of great things, but I don't think that necessarily tells me what you did for the business or what you did for that team. And when you can do that, that's when you separate yourself from the other thousands of candidates who are applying. And sure, is that the big separator? No, but that's a pretty good separator when you're trying to get through that initial process of making it into a phone screen or making it into an interview.
So there's a difference in your mind between what you can do and what you want to do.
Yeah, I think it's a more of, hey, what can I do? That can being the requirements of the job. And then, hey, look what I've done is that value piece. When I say like, hey, what value you showed in that role, it's okay, I worked with 25 clients to help them do X, Y, and Z, or I've monitored 3 to 4 large accounts over $3 million, something like that to show, okay, I went to this role and I performed way above those requirements that you might see. And it's also just different. A lot of times you see on those resumes where it's just the job requirements, or it's just a simple, I monitored this, I required this, or I performed this. And it's different when you can set yourself apart from others.
Dominic, if you have a company or two that you think is just a perfect match for you to work at, is there a way that you can get your foot in the door to help you be more of a prime candidate for them?
If you have no traction at all, it's tough. I guess I'll walk through my Deloitte experience a little bit. I always thought I'd be perfect for Deloitte, but year after year, I had an accounting major, I had a computer science major, perfect candidate for them. But year after year, I kept getting rejected because all I did was apply. I just applied online and then I got rejected. And so there's a number of things that contribute to. I don't know the full story behind all of those reasons that I got rejected year after year. But when things started to change is when I started to take the non-traditional route. And you'll go on LinkedIn today and you'll see people with signs on the side of highways landing jobs. You'll see people landing jobs by creating websites. You'll see the craziest things now. And I think finding the non-traditional way that works for you, for me, it's been having conversations with the right people. I landed my role at Deloitte because I went and I cold emailed a recruiter and we had lunch together. And then we just kept going on from there and kept moving forward. That's where I'm sitting and getting your foot in the door. I think there's a little bit of patience. I wasn't ready for Deloitte at first, so patience is a big one. I remember wanting that Deloitte role way early on in my career. And I've done this with a bunch of clients where we've talked about this layup roles. That's what I call them, right? Hey, this role is going to set me up so that one day I can get into that role. I know I want to be with that company. I know they're really cool. That's something I identify with their value, I identify with what they do on a day-to-day basis, but I'm not there yet because of experience. And so then you go out and get yourself another role in order to leverage yourself into that dream one or that one you think you're an ideal fit with.
Dominic, I've read somewhere is that up over 40% of all hires happen because of a referral. What does that mean, and how can I be one of those 40% that has that referral?
Referrals they're a weird thing now, in my opinion. I'm trying to give some different takes here tonight. I think referrals are different. I love saying this, create an advocate. You'll see it on LinkedIn sometimes. I know Austin talks about it. It's one of my big things as well. You need to have someone on the inside that's willing to speak to you, not just someone you met on LinkedIn and you're like, hey, can you refer me? That happens all the time, right? My inbox gets filled with, hey, can you refer me into Deloitte? Hey, can you refer me to this position? And I think once you do that, you just start yourself out so thin. There's no concrete, I'm trying to think of a better word. There's no concrete behind that outreach. There's no relationship relationship. That person doesn't really know you. They're just going to a link on their internal site and then sending you, maybe they're sending you a personal link and you can apply, but there's no substance behind that. But what if you looked at it another way? You made a relationship with inside the company, you got to know someone, it took a couple months, it's a longer process, and then they really knew about you, they knew your story, they knew why you wanted to work at that firm, that company, that place, and then you went ahead and had them refer you. The chances are a lot different for those two candidates. So when you want to be a part of that 40%, sure, it's a large number for all the job candidates out there. I think you need to focus on building advocates. And again, I don't think it's a good idea to start at a place where it's just random. Sure, there are relationships that are random, like the random Deloitte relationship really did help me out, but more often than not, you're going to get that contact information. You're going to meet that person through someone you already know, whether it's an alumni organization, a book club, whatever it may be.
Dominic, how has COVID changed the way people go about looking for a job? And now that we are hopefully going towards a more normal COVID state, has the recruiting process reverted back, or is it continuing along the lines that we saw during COVID?
So to the first point of COVID and kind of how has it changed, I think for one thing, people are going immediately to these job boards and searching remote. Remote's the first word in their job, in their job search or that role they're looking for. And so I think that's where that is hurting a lot of candidates. I see that stop a lot of clients of mine. I've seen it stop a lot of initial conversations I have because people are so dead set on, okay, if the job description didn't say remote or if this didn't say that, then I'm not even going to look at it. And I think that's a bad place to be. Sure, if there's no remote, it says no remote, it's a red flag. You're like, okay, I really can't do that. I have to have a couple days remote or whatever. But you're better off going down the line and trying to negotiate that or work into that rather than cutting out roles from your target list or from your opportunity right off the bat. And I think that's the one way I would say COVID's changed a lot of things for people when they kick off their job search. And then in terms of the current process and what is it reverting back to its old way, I think it's only getting better. Honestly, I see a lot of great things from recruiters on LinkedIn, a lot of great posts. Sure, are there still those sad ones of whether you hate ghosting, whether you hate, whatever you don't like. I think it's getting better. They're starting to value candidates who don't come at you with a Harvard graduate 4.0. They start to look for candidates that are providing that value, can show that they provided that value in their last firms. And I hate to just blanket statement with their word value, but they can show you how they stand out from others.
Dominic, do you think that you should have on your cover letter or in your resume the fact that you are looking really only for jobs that are remote or have some hybrid of remote work?
I don't think it should be on your resume. No, it's something for the cover letter. If they read a cover letter, there's so many people out there who submit them and spend hours on end trying to perfect them, and then they never get read in the end. But I think that's something worth mentioning in the cover letter. Would I mention it on the resume? Not one bit. But if that's something that is really near and dear to you and you really need that, I think you can definitely fit it into your cover letter at some point.
Dominic, what's the one or two things that hold most people back from being successful in their job search?
I love this question. For me, and what I've seen recently is being way too hard on yourself. I've had numerous calls recently where I'm just saying, and I think I've posted about it a little bit, it's just be gentle. Be gentler on yourself, be gentler on the people you're demanding stuff from, and just be easy on yourself as you go through this process. I think some days it's very personal. Some days you need to come at it like a robot, but there's just all these ups and downs constantly. Rent's due, you're waiting on this, you need this job. There's so many different factors going on, and it's such a stressful process that I think you really need to be gentle on yourself as you go through it, because the harder you are, the quicker you get burnt out and the quicker you get sick of it, and the quicker you end up in a role that isn't what you really wanted, and then you're back in the same position 3 to 6 months later. Or maybe you're still in that position, but you're unhappy. And who wants to show up to a role that they don't want every single day? I think the second thing I would say is having a bias for action. It's so easy to get caught up in spending 4 or 5 hours on a resume, a couple hours on a cover letter, or analysis paralysis. You're just going on LinkedIn, you're scrolling through all these career coaches' posts and just saying, oh, I could do this, oh, I could do that. And I think what you really need to do is go get with someone who's been where you want to be, go ask them how they got where they wanted to be, and then follow those steps and break them down chunk by chunk, like the smallest chunk that you need, whatever's manageable for you, because every career and every job search is different and every person is different. So you need to make sure it works for you. And then once you find that, just continuing to have that bias for action every single day until you need a break is huge, because it's hard to see it, but the little wins, the little outreaches, the little conversations you schedule, they mean everything once you pile them up at the end of the week.
Do you believe it's better to be viewed by the recruiter or the hiring manager as a niche expert or being a total generalist?
Niche expert. I think you can go to a couple different ways, and obviously classic, it depends on what type of role you're targeting. But I think you want to be able to say, hey, this is why I'm different. This is what I bring to the table. This is why you should hire me.
Dominic, I'd be curious how you'd answer or how you coach some of your clients to answer a few of the interview questions that come up. That first classic one where the hiring manager says, Dominic, tell me about yourself.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think it's the biggest thing you have to avoid here is a robotic script. Please. I think it's awesome that you practice in front of a mirror. I think it's awesome that you practice this in a mock interview. But if you wrote your script out word for word and going to memorize that going into the interview, one, I guarantee you'll forget it. And two, I guarantee you the recruiter or hiring manager is going to be staring at you with wide eyes like, okay, what did this person just tell me? How I coach my clients is I need you to include a little bit of your personal side. It can be 1 to 2 sentences. From a family of 6, out of the St. Louis area. I really enjoy doing this. And then it can go and you can flip-flop it either way. I think talking about your career right off the bat and then maybe ending with that is a perfect way to end it. You want to focus on those, hey, this is where I've been, this is what I've done in those places. And I'm not saying you need to spiel for 5-10 minutes on this, but this is where you just give them that brief summary and then close it with something personal. Let them see that other side of you.
Here's another question oftentimes used. Tell me about a difficult time with a coworker or a project and how you resolve that. How do you coach answering that one?
Yeah, classic one. I think a practice that I ask all my clients to do is be able to walk through your resume and tell me a story behind every single bullet point on there. It was something I learned early on in my career, and it only helped me because they used to just sit there and pick apart resumes, and they still do, right? They're just in the interview picking it apart. Oh, what does this mean? What does that mean? And more often than not, people want to hear stories. They don't want to hear some blanket answer that only includes technical terms. They want to hear, hey, what happened here? What is that? So having those stories prepared is the biggest one. In that specific question, the one pitfall I would watch out for is talking bad about someone, talking bad about a company, a person. That's just something you want to avoid there. But generally, just knowing a good story, hey, problem came up, this is how I solved it, this is the feedback I received, and this is how I plan to implement it moving forward. That's an awesome way to answer that. And again, you don't have to tell them a 10, 15-minute story. You can keep it short and sweet here because this is definitely one of those ones they're always going to ask.
What if you're asked, Dominic, why are you interested in this role or in our company?
These are just the basics. These are the interview questions that you need to be able to hit out of the park. For me, I always came to these with 3 things was easy for me. There's a bunch of different formulas for how you answer interview questions. There's a STAR formula, whatever works for you. And I think for me, when I was going to interview at Deloitte, why Deloitte, Dominic? Prestige, the talent I would get to work with, and the exposure I would get to different projects. And then, of course, I elaborated on those, but I had those in my head from preparation. I was able to tell a little bit of maybe it was a story or maybe it was just another sentence around each of those 3 things. And then it also reminded me to stop talking. Got it from my mother, love her so much, but I can talk to a brick wall. And I think that was something I struggled with. So knowing your pitfall there, but that just always helped me keep the answer concise and right to the point. Hey, I researched this role. These are the 3 things I want. And this is a question that you can blow out of the park with 10 minutes of research before an interview, and not 10 minutes before the interview, but setting aside 10 minutes at a different time to really understand and sit with the information about the company and the role.
Here's the last standard question that everyone's going to get every time they interview. Dominic, where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years from now?
Hate this one, Bob. Can't stand this question, but it's going to be asked, as you said. I think for me and a lot of people in their 20s, 30s, this is kind of a tough one. They're like, their first reaction when they're out with their friends, I have no idea. They don't know how to answer that question. I think one, looking at where this role could lead, knowing that's when you need to know, hey, where does this lead? In 5-10 years, what are some of my exit opportunities? And do you need to speak directly to that? No. And some people have some crafty, witty answers around this. I'm sure you can find on LinkedIn and stuff like that. But I just say, hey, I always pointed to growth, personal and professional development-esque. I always wanted to be pushed into situations of pressure. And that's what I always try to recommend when you're going through that 5 years. I'm not really sure what it's going to look like in 5 years, but I do know these are the couple things I want. I want exposure to X, Y, and Z. I want to run these type of projects. I want to do this. And having those nailed down, just being as specific as possible is going to help you here.
Dominic, you've said before that candidates should keep these things in mind while they're talking with the hiring manager. They should make certain that they ask them questions about themselves, and you should smile, enjoy the process, and soak in as much information as you can. What did you mean by that?
I think it's just we've scripted too much. We've come to interviews and we're just trying to remember everything. We're balls, just super nervous, all balled up and not being ourselves. And I think you look back on those moments and you look back at those recruiters that you get interviewed with, and especially if you end up on the other side, and we rarely take time to say, wow, that was a good interview. I did my best. I showed up and I won that day. And I think that's all you can get sometimes. And so you really got to enjoy that and get to know the other person. Of course, it's not always you. I've had some terrible interviews and they weren't because of me. I can tell you that. The other person was just dry and it was weird. And so those are bound to happen. But when you get someone who's willing to talk, who's willing to expand, who's willing to ride that wave, I think you really need to ride that out, because the more often that you find common ground in these interviews is when you're really going to win.
Dominic, the when and how many times should a candidate follow up after the interview? And then the second part of that, is there a time that you should just stop and let it go?
For me, there's some people that get there and right after they've done the interview, they get home and they send the email right away. I've always waited a couple hours, but that's just personal preference. I've waited either till the evening of that night or something like that. And then I usually give them, the standard was always 2 weeks. That's what I usually give them. That's usually what they set aside themselves. Some are better, some are not there. I give it about 3 weeks. If I haven't heard anything, I'm already like, okay, this probably isn't happening. A month after, that's throwing up red flags on my end. Why would I want to be with a company that it takes a month for them to get back to me? I think that's a red flag that you need to watch out for as well. But also, it's just something that you need to do. I've seen candidates get taken out of the hiring process because they did not follow up. And whether it was a thank you, whether it was, I had these questions, I had a good time, whatever it may be, I've seen them get removed. So you definitely do need to follow up. And I think this is also a perfect time to say that you shouldn't be playing the waiting game. If you haven't heard back from them, it's the next day you should be, okay, what's my next opportunity? What am I looking at? What options do I have? Sure, you may be tired. Sure, it's not fun. Hey, I just sat through 3 rounds of interviews. I don't want to come back today. All right, well, give yourself a couple hours, give yourself a day break, and then get back to finding another opportunity for yourself. Because at the end of the day, you want the most options for yourself as you look at new roles. And so waiting around to hear back is going to limit those options for you.
Dominic, are there any books or other resources that you would recommend to someone who is looking for that next great job opportunity?
Honestly, Bob, I think we're in a time of there being so much information out there. You go on LinkedIn, you see thousands of coaches out there talking about how to do it this way, how to do it this way. You hear hundreds, thousands of podcasts, career focused as well. And I'm not going to give any specific recommendation. There's a couple other coaches I love on LinkedIn and I love their content. Sarah Johnston, Austin, I love some of those big names. I think you just need to find what works for you, where you run towards where you're getting results. So say you read a post, you like this, you went ahead and implemented it and it worked for you. Cool. Repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. Because I think we're in a time where we're just sitting and scrolling and looking at all these different ways to do something, all these different ways to land an interview, and then we just get burnt out and more frustrated and more stressed out. So I think once you find a creator, once you find a strategy that you really like, whether you're working with a coach, whether you love their process, whether it's something that you've done for a while and it works for you, continuing to run towards that and putting yourself around new content every while is good. You want to stay up to date on the latest trends. But I think when we're just sitting there and absorbing, that's when it tends to hurt us. There's obviously a bunch of self-help business books out there that I've read, but none that I really love for the career or the job search space. I always found myself on LinkedIn for that type of advice and that type of relationships. I would say you're going to get the best information from people that you know and people who know your situation pretty well. And the key is they have been where you want to be. And so that's got to be the biggest factor when you're talking to people and you're going to get more information about your job search.
Dominic, if our listeners remember only 3 things from today's conversation, what are those 3 things that you want them to take away to help them in their job search?
Be gentle on yourself as you go through the process. It's not easy. It's personal. And then it's not personal sometimes. There's so many ebbs and flows. So be gentle on yourself. Having a bias for action is huge. It doesn't need to be the biggest chunk. It doesn't need to be the biggest task in the world. Just break it down and do what works for you that day. And then 3, I would say get around new people. Getting around new people changed my life. If you're around the same people, if you're around, the same buddies, you got to get around there, have different conversations, see what's really out there, see what type of opportunities exist for you. Because if you sit around those same people and those same projects and you show up to that same role, and then you're limiting yourself for growth. So getting around new people has changed my life, and I highly recommend that.
Dominic, I said at the very beginning, I was so looking forward to this discussion and your thoughts and ideas, and you didn't let me down whatsoever. A great time, some great information, and I know that the people that listen to this is going to help them find that next great job opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Bob. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening. We're working in unprecedented times. The purpose of these episodes is to give you the support and critical tools to adjust with the changing marketplace. I'll continue to introduce you to guests who have successfully survived their own obstacle course and can share useful information. If today's message was helpful to you, please share it on your social media. Your review and rating helps get this to more people. Also, if you have questions or podcast ideas for future conversations, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Change is constant. The more prepared you are for it, the better and easier the change will occur. Thank you again. This is your host, Bob Gerst. See you at our next episode.